The boy just took a casual glance. He was deeply attracted by the girl's stunning beauty. But she didn't seem to lack suitors around her. The boy had no choice but to look away in disappointment. But just then, the girl's bag was accidentally knocked down by her companion. It fell into the sea at once. Seeing the girl in a panic, the boy jumped into the water without hesitation. He quickly retrieved the bag. But just as he reached the shore, the girl's companion tried to take the bag first, as if the credit belonged to him. However, the boy ignored him and walked straight to the girl, handing the bag back to her. "Oh, I'm always so clumsy. You really saved my life. My name is Savannah. John. John, you are so brave. Everything I have is in here, so I owe you a favor." "It's nothing." After just a brief conversation, John turned and left, feeling a bit shy. But who knew that in his panic, he went the wrong way. He had to turn around again and awkwardly follow behind Savannah. And when Savannah saw John following her, she warmly invited him to her home for a barbecue party. Faced with the warm invitation from the girl he liked, John really didn't know how to refuse. So he followed Savannah to her house. But at the party that followed, Randy thought John had stolen his spotlight earlier, and began to constantly. Fortunately, Savannah noticed in time and resolved the awkward situation. After Randy felt bored and left, the two finally had some precious time alone. "Sorry, I think he likes me." "I think so too." "No, he doesn't. I'm not right for him. He just hasn't realized it yet." Just as the atmosphere became subtle, a little boy suddenly ran over and hugged Savannah. John's heart sank involuntarily. He thought Savannah was already married with children. But this misunderstanding was quickly cleared up. It turned out the boy was just a child from Savannah's neighbor's house. Then the child's father, Tim, also appeared and smiled as he greeted John. This interesting little episode actually brought the two closer together. During the chat that followed, Savannah learned that John was a Special Forces soldier on leave. And John also learned that Savannah was still a student. Time quickly passed until evening. Although they had just met, the two hit it off unexpectedly well. Even the full moon rising quietly in the sky became a topic they shared. "Have you noticed it's big when it starts? Have you noticed? The moon is huge when it first rises. Have you noticed it starts? But when it hangs high in the night sky, it becomes so small. You know, this is just a matter of perspective. Actually, no matter when or where, you just need to hold up your hand and close one eye, and the moon will be the same size as your thumb." However, Randy watched the two standing side by side in the moonlight and felt very uncomfortable deep down as the night grew deeper. Although John understood it was time to go home, he was a bit reluctant to let go of this wonderful connection. So he asked Savannah softly if they could meet again tomorrow. Savannah smiled and nodded. Although John maintained a calm appearance on the surface, he was already overjoyed inside. He even stepped into a nearby campfire while leaving. He pretended to be calm as he said goodbye to Savannah. But as soon as he reached the main road, John couldn't help but limp. Clearly, that burn from earlier was quite painful. Just then, a pair of headlights cut through the night. It turned out to be Tim, who was driving into town to buy ice cream. Tim warmly invited John to catch a ride. John originally didn't want to trouble anyone, but considering the injury on his foot, he finally got into the car gratefully. However, while chatting on the way, John vaguely felt that something was a bit different. But he didn't think much of it. The car soon arrived in front of John's house. "Hey, John. I'll say this up front, if you hurt Savannah, I'll have to break something of yours. Like that bone thing inside your leg." Okay. Regarding Tim's warning, he just assumed it was because Savannah and her neighbor were close. As they parted ways, the two waved goodbye to each other in a friendly manner. The next evening, John took Savannah to a restaurant in town. They had a very pleasant conversation, and time passed by without them realizing it was already night. Then, Savannah suddenly asked about John's family. But John seemed a bit hesitant, because he had been raised by his father alone since he was a child. His father had always been a man of few words, seemingly only interested in collecting coins. But Savannah still insisted on meeting his father, because only then could she understand John better. I want to meet your father. Just tonight. Just tonight. Although John was a bit reluctant, he still brought Savannah home. To his surprise, his father was very friendly towards Savannah, and enthusiastically admiring them with her. Savannah remained polite and composed throughout, and she had a very engaging conversation with the old man. This unexpected harmony between the two made John even more convinced that Savannah was his destiny. It wasn't until late at night that John took Savannah home. When it was time to say goodbye, he tried to express his love several times, but he never knew how to say it. She gently stepped forward and kissed him. Wait, Savannah. We'll see each other again soon, right? We'll see each other again soon. The next day, John couldn't help but go near Savannah's house, and Savannah had already noticed him. Their mutual, unspoken affection made their eyes meet time and time again. Suddenly, Savannah brought John to the place where she had been working recently. Looking at the girl who selflessly dedicated herself to strangers before him. Looking at the selfless girl before him, a stranger. John increasingly felt she was like an angel. She lived a simple life with no bad habits. She was even willing to help strangers selflessly, although they hadn't officially started dating yet. But Savannah seemed to see through his thoughts, and said that she also had many flaws. I curse. No way, it's true. You're not like that, I do curse. But I've never heard you curse. That's because I haven't said it out loud. Alright, you have a point. I have flaws, John. Believe me, I have many flaws, you will find out. I hope so. Afterward, Savannah took him to see the house under construction. But before she could finish introducing it, a torrential rain suddenly poured down from the sky, and the two had to take shelter in the only small space with a roof. However, this heavy rain didn't ruin the atmosphere. Instead, it added a touch of romantic mood. As their conversation deepened, Savannah couldn't help but kiss John, and the two officially started a romantic relationship in the rain. After that, a sweet romance began. They often ate with John's father. Savannah would also bring John to participate in the house construction, and John would teach her how to surf on the ocean. Every night, they would sing love songs to each other. But one day, when John came to find Savannah as usual, he saw her sitting alone in a corner. Her expression seemed to hide some worries. Only after John asked did he learn. Savannah was returning to school tomorrow, and she knew John was also about to return to the army, facing the upcoming year of separation. Her heart was filled with anxiety about the future. But John firmly told her, I promise. It won't be as long as you think. Then I'll come back and never leave again. You promise? I promise. After receiving John's promise, Savannah finally regained her usual spirit. She softly told John she would visit his father often, and tried to use some methods to help him. But upon hearing the description special, John suddenly became a bit angry. He felt Savannah was discriminating against his father. He felt Savannah. Are you saying my dad is like Alan? You mean he's mentally disabled? No, Alan isn't mentally disabled, he has autism. People get overlooked. Some people with milder symptoms get overlooked. Is this your plan? Have you been studying my dad all this time? No, why would you think that? I've been with my dad my whole life. We live together, we eat together. If he weren't normal, wouldn't I be able to tell? Right? Do you think I need you to come and tell me this? Before Savannah could explain, John turned and left. But at this awkward moment, Randy actually stepped up again. Seeing John leave Savannah behind, he thought this was the perfect opportunity to show off his manliness. What exactly is going on between you and Savannah? Hey, what are you doing? John. Oh, my. John. After knocking everyone down, John turned and continued to leave. Tim was also injured in the conflict. Actually, Tim's son. As their neighbor, Savannah knew a lot about the signs of autism. Through spending time together these days, he didn't dare to look strangers in the eye. These were not signs of being antisocial, but rather hidden symptoms of autism. She had just learned about this at school. People with autism struggle with verbal communication, but they feel relaxed around familiar things. Just like how John's father always touched his coins. So she accompanied the old man in counting coins, and chatted about stories of misprinted coins. These weren't just her trying to force a conversation. Actually, it's the same for introverted people around us. Instead of asking why they aren't talking, it's better to join them in doing what they like. But John didn't understand that thoughtfulness at the time. And Savannah never expected that John's reaction would be so intense. But the next day, John also realized his impulsiveness from yesterday. He went to Savannah's house to apologize, but their neighbor Tim said Savannah wasn't home. However, she hadn't returned to school yet either. I didn't know you were behind me. It's my fault. I shouldn't have stood behind a soldier. Hey, if you see her, could you pass a message for me? Sure. Fortunately, Tim didn't hold a grudge, and was willing to help him deliver the apology letter. When John returned home, his father had already baked a double portion of lasagna. Only then did John carefully observe his father's every move, discovering that his father's silence was indeed different from most people's. John used to think these were just his father's strange habits, but in fact, these were all signs of autism. Later, he also understood that a family member's abnormalities never appear suddenly. We are too busy to notice those repetitive little actions, and those fixed habits. These are actually their silent cries for help. But before he could think it through, the sound of a car came from outside the window. It turned out that after receiving the apology letter, Savannah had come specifically to apologize to John. She admitted that she wasn't a doctor, and shouldn't have easily concluded that his father had autism. But when they met, they had already forgiven each other. Besides apologizing in person, although she had to return to school soon, Savannah still stayed behind, had lunch with John and his father. Dearest John, although I've only been with you for a week or two, I've already fallen in love with you. We won't be able to see each other for a year. Do you know what this feels like? After saying goodbye to Savannah, the day for John to return to his unit soon arrived. His father came to see him off, but until John got on the bus, he just kept avoiding eye contact, seemingly not knowing how to express his inner reluctance. As the car bumped along and drove away, John leaned against the car. Lavender scent. The letter paper carried the scent of lavender. The lines were filled with sunshine, and things like, I saw a seagull today. It looked like the way you taught me to surf. John read Savannah's letter carefully, and the corners of his mouth lifted slightly without him realizing it. Even the wind outside seemed to have turned sweet. After John returned to his unit, the two continued to keep in touch through letters. John would describe what he saw and heard in detail in his letters, and Savannah would often share bits and pieces of campus life in her replies. One day after the 8th letter, Tim brought his son to visit Savannah's home, and this gathering planted a new dream in Savannah's heart. Today, Alan and I went horseback riding. This was his first time riding a horse. So I had this dream. I want to start a summer camp for children with autism. At the summer camp, the children can ride horses to their heart's content, at least giving them a chance to have a free and easy experience. What do you think? A daydream, huh? No, this isn't a daydream. This is a wonderful dream. Letters became their only way to fight loneliness. John would often write about the moon over the battlefield in his letters, and Savannah would draw flower petals from the seaside. But John's unit frequently changed stations, making the letters arrive slower and slower, sometimes even taking half a month for one letter. In fact, what people in long-distance relationships fear most is the feeling of losing contact, even if you can't see each other often. A sentence like, I saw a cloud that looked like you today, is more reassuring than wait for me to come back. So in their 33rd letter, they agreed to look at the starry sky at the same time every night, letting the moonlight convey this love that spans mountains and rivers. During this time, Savannah would visit John's father whenever she had free time. And every time the old man saw her come, he would arrange the coins by year in advance. Because besides loving to share coins, he also didn't know how to express his welcome. So, he treated Savannah in his own familiar way. Later, Savannah understood that for a silent elder, you don't need to force him to talk. Accompanying him to do what he likes is the best form of care. After talking with John's father, Savannah also learned that those coins had a father's love that John hadn't understood. When John went to buy ice cream as a child, the owner gave him a misprinted coin as change. And his father, seeing the enthusiastic John, started collecting misprinted coins just to keep him company. Later, when John grew up and started chasing trends, his father still kept a pile of coins. Because this is the only way he can keep memories of his son's childhood. It is also how he wants to protect those precious memories between father and son. It's just that John didn't understand at the time. He just followed the crowd and jumped on the trend. And he gradually had fewer things in common with his father. That is the whole story. But on the day Savannah received the reply letter, a world-shaking event occurred. That was the world-renowned 9/11 incident. This sudden disaster made the team members who were originally preparing to retire all voluntarily apply to extend their service. And because of this, John's team was granted a special 2-day leave. But John did not choose to rest. Instead, he applied to return home. You're going back to Charleston? Yes. Man, are you crazy? We only have 2 days off. Excluding flight time, you'll only be there for 18 hours at most. It means a lot to me. I don't know when I'll be able to go back, so I have to go back once. Getting married after surviving a long-distance relationship. This is probably the gentlest hope in all long-distance relationships. And Savannah felt the same way. When the boy she missed day and night finally returned, she crossed the railing without hesitation. She ran toward the figure she had been waiting for. Reunited after a year apart. It felt as if they had just parted yesterday. This time, Savannah planned to take John to meet her parents. At the same time, she also invited John's father to go along. The old man had changed his clothes early and was waiting. He baked his signature lasagna as usual. But after they set off, his expression gradually became nervous and uneasy. Not long after the car started, he asked to stop. He insisted on returning home. Listen, stop the car. Okay, I'll turn around now. It's okay, it's okay. I want to get out, stop the car. Okay. Dad, stop. Dad, don't do this. The father's behavior seemed to confirm Savannah's guess. He did indeed show signs of autism. The thought of going to an unfamiliar environment to interact with strangers filled him with intense anxiety. In the end, the two had no choice but to take him home first. But even though he understood his father's condition, John still felt dissatisfied. Dad, I only have one night. I have to return to the base, understand? You guys go. You should all leave. His father's situation made John feel helpless. He still went to see Savannah's parents as planned. When he arrived at Savannah's house, the yard was already filled with various cars. And Savannah's mother was very satisfied with this young man. At the subsequent party, John also met Randy and Tim. However, when Savannah's father asked about John's work, Savannah learned that John had already applied to extend his service. He had already applied to extend his service. And his return this time was actually to say a proper goodbye to her. Although John also wanted to enjoy quiet time with her, the duty on his shoulders left him no choice. Between personal feelings and national duty, he found it truly difficult to choose. I want to make the right choice. I have no idea. I didn't think about going, it's just that. Because I want you to tell me. I want you to tell me, okay? Can you, I beg you, tell me what you want me to do? Savannah finally chose to understand John's decision. And on this night, the feelings between the two heated up rapidly. Their hearts also drew closer to each other. The next day, Savannah came to the airport to see John off. And the old father had already been waiting there for a long time. He remained taciturn. Even though the corners of his eyes were already slightly moist, he still couldn't say a word of care. After a simple farewell to his father, John took Savannah into his arms. and softly comforted the girl who was both strong and tender. "So we are fine, right? As always." After this affectionate kiss goodbye, 2 years of long-distance longing. No one knew when or where they would meet again. And when John first returned to the army, they still kept in touch through letters as they did before. Carefully treasure. Also became his most important spiritual sustenance. But gradually, John found that the letters he received were becoming fewer and fewer. "Hey. Sorry, there was no letter from you today either." After noticing Savannah's obvious distancing, John felt a strong sense of unease in his heart. Tried to contact her, but after waiting bitterly for another 2 months, John finally received the long-awaited reply. But after he finished reading the content of the letter, he felt heartbroken. It turned out to be a breakup letter. Savannah said in the letter that she was already engaged to someone else. It turns out that no matter how deep the feelings are, they are hard to withstand the erosion of time. John held back his tears and threw every letter Savannah had written into the fire, watching the flames consume the words that carried the past. He wanted to shout that "I am still waiting for you," but could only watch those letters slowly turn into a pile of ash. However, before John could walk out of the haze of the breakup, he was ordered to carry out a mission again. But in the hail of bullets, a comrade was unfortunately shot and fell to the ground. John quickly eliminated the enemy, and then dragged his comrade behind cover. Fortunately, the bullet only hit the teammate's bulletproof vest. But just as the two breathed a sigh of relief, John. But in the moment when the shadow of death suddenly descended, what appeared before John's eyes was Savannah's figure. The breathtaking beauty of her when they first met had long since turned into a wound that would never heal, deeply branded in the bottom of his heart. 3 months later, John's injuries gradually improved. Although he could have chosen an honorable discharge due to his injuries, he voluntarily chose to remain on the battlefield, because only by constantly fighting in the hail of bullets could he temporarily forget that unforgettable relationship. Only by keeping his body in a state of constant exhaustion could his soul find a moment of peace. This was John's choice, and also a contradictory state of mind, both an escape from the past and an inability to truly let go. However, things are unpredictable. One day, John suddenly received the tragic news that his father was critically ill. Therefore, the army granted him emergency leave. John hurriedly took a plane back to his hometown. Looking at his father's haggard face on the hospital bed, he is still conscious, but not very clear-headed. He has difficulty responding. I find it hard to say exactly how serious the stroke is. I find it hard to say. Because when they found him, they didn't know how long he had been down. How long now? If I had been there, I could have discovered it sooner. If that were the case, would it have made a difference? Possibly. I am just guessing. Over the years, he has always been immersed in his own personal pain. While completely ignoring his father's loneliness and waiting, John looked back on the past, feeling the pain of his own selfishness and lack of filial piety. Now that he wants to make up for it, it is already too late. His father used his last bit of strength to hug the weeping John, gently stroking his hair, and showed incomparable tolerance and love. But not long after, his father's heartbeat gradually stopped, as if his persistence all these days was just to see his son one last time. And at this moment, he was also heartbroken for his own past indifference and absence. The pain of losing a loved one made him truly realize the impermanence and preciousness of life. This was also the darkest day of John's life. Although he knew he had long since broken up with Savannah, the loneliness deep in his heart still drove him to come to Savannah's doorstep. "What brings you back?" "It's my father." "Is your father okay?" "No." "I'm very sad. I really wish I knew." "It's okay. Would you like to come in and sit for a while? I'm all alone. Savannah invited John into the house. And when John saw a wedding photo on the cabinet, and when John saw, he realized that Savannah's current husband was actually her neighbor, Tim. John was about to ask the reason for all this, but the hospital called just then. He said he wanted to see you. Is it Tim? It turns out that during the days when John was away at the battlefield, Savannah sighed, giving her meticulous care. The companionship that grew over time was ultimately better than being apart. Savannah knew that Tim had always been secretly in love with her. However, relationships ultimately depend on fate. Savannah's heart was always tied to John, so she could not truly accept Tim's feelings. But later, Tim was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and he had to take care of his autistic son alone. Facing this father and son who needed care, Savannah ultimately chose to repay past kindness with marriage. It was not that Savannah did not love John anymore, but reality crushed the waiting. Seeing the pitiful situation of his father and son, she could not help but give in to her compassion. Sometimes, the choices of adults are not about who to love, but about what responsibilities to bear. After leaving the house, Savannah told John that it had reached its final moments. Then she took John to the hospital to visit. When seeing the intimate interaction between Savannah and Tim, John unconsciously, when Savannah stepped away for a moment, Tim had the chance to speak his heart to John. She still loves you. It's obvious. You can see it on her face. I really wish that weren't true. But she has never looked at me like that. You should know that too. John. Afterward, Savannah picked up Alan and returned home. But after Alan got out of the car, she told John about Tim's current situation again. He wants to go home. There's an experimental drug at a company in Texas. It might be useful. But obviously, the insurance company won't pay for it. My parents sold their beach house last year. That is truly a timely help. But I never expected that the money would be spent like water. Stay for dinner, okay? Looking at Savannah's sorrowful appearance, John felt powerless. John felt powerless because he knew that his meager salary could not even cover one round of Tim's treatment costs. But when the two were having dinner together, John still couldn't help but ask what was on his mind. Why didn't you call me? Don't I deserve any explanation other than that letter? You could have called me. You didn't give me any chance to make you change your mind. Don't you think you owe me that? I couldn't. You couldn't? You didn't value me enough. Why didn't you call me? Why? Why? Because I couldn't. Tell me, why couldn't you? Because I couldn't. I want an answer. Because, as soon as I heard your voice, I would have changed my mind. This explanation left John stunned, not knowing how to respond. But Savannah still could not calm down, continuing to pour out those long-held feelings. Do you think I felt good? And do you think it was easy for me without you? Do you think I wasn't living in misery without you? Tim is sick. He is very ill and he needs me. He needs me to help him. I am very lonely and don't know what I am doing. Savannah poured out all her grievances and bitterness. Savannah poured out all grievances and bitterness in her heart. Tears could not be held back and fell. And John also walked. And John also walked forward, holding the little girl tightly in his arms. His eyes were full of love and tenderness. After her emotions calmed down a little, Savannah took out the letters John had written to her. She also recalled the back of John's first letter. Those words filled with deep love. But just as the two were immersed in memories, Savannah accidentally knocked over her water glass. Her clothes were soaked by the water. Then Savannah went to the side to change her clothes. But in the reflection of the mirror, John inadvertently saw everything. And Savannah also noticed his gaze. But John knew very well, the girl in front of him no longer belonged to him. After Savannah finished changing, it was already late at night. John knew it was time to leave. So he intended to say goodbye to Savannah. But Savannah said the words John had once said to her. Her words carried a hint of testing and a hint of expectation. Will we see each other again soon? Say it. I said it, now it's your turn. Do you remember? Although 1,000 words were in his heart, John could not give any promises, because they had already chosen different paths, and could no longer turn back. John. Say it.
Welcome to the Shin Music Channel. Enjoy.
Goodbye, Savannah. Watching John's retreating figure, Savannah's heart felt as if it had suddenly fallen into a thorn bush. It was painful and she felt helpless. On the other side, John, he could understand Savannah. When they first met, Savannah had always been kind. But he could not forgive Savannah, nor could he forgive her betrayal. But after returning home, thinking of Savannah's helpless appearance, John still made a decision in silence. Early the next morning, John went to the pawn shop to inquire about a large collection of coins from his father. After agreeing on a satisfactory price with the owner, he intended to sell them all. Do you really want to sell all of these to me? Yes, sir. Except for this one. John only kept one coin. It was the first one from the collection journey he started with his father. This coin not only carried deep memories of his father, but also, when he faced major decisions, it guided him in the right direction time and time again. Until this day, he unexpectedly received another letter from Savannah. Dear John, I probably haven't written a letter with a pen in 5 years. But I thought, maybe now I can write a letter to you, to tell you what happened. A few weeks after meeting you, Tim received an anonymous donation. That donation helped him get what the insurance company couldn't provide: time. It turned out that after John sold all the coins last time, he anonymously donated all the money to Tim. After that, he silently returned to the army. 5 years have passed since that parting. Although that donation could not save Tim's life, it bought Tim 2 precious months of time. During that extra time, Tim was able to calmly say goodbye to his friends and family, and make arrangements for his autistic son. Savannah seemed to have guessed that the donor was John. But she didn't point it out, just silently feeling the impermanence of time. I have learned my lesson about the issue of time. Whether it was the 2 weeks I spent with you back then, or the last 2 months spent with him, time always runs out. I don't know where you are now, John, but I know that a long time ago, I lost the right to ask that. No matter how many years have passed, I have always believed in one thing. I will see you again. A few years later, John retired from the military. He returned to the city in his memories. But just as he was locking his bike on the street, he looked up. It was as if an inexplicable force drew him to look up. He unexpectedly saw the girl who had captured his heart again. And Savannah saw him too, with that same familiar smile. In an instant, time seemed to flow back 10 years. But unlike 10 years ago, This time Savannah rushed out without hesitation. And this sudden embrace melted away the barriers of the years. From misunderstanding to forgiveness, from missing each other to reuniting. Their story holds the truest form of love. He carried the responsibility of his country and his longing. She faced reality and made her choice. A coin carried unspeakable fatherly love. A breakup letter was filled with helplessness and concern. If there had been no war to separate them, if there had been more patience to listen back then, perhaps their story wouldn't have taken so many detours. Perhaps their story wouldn't have taken so many detours. But it is precisely these regrets that make us understand. True love is never just a smooth journey together. But even if we drift apart, we can still carry the kindness and courage we taught each other, and guard the tenderness in our hearts through the years.